Yeah, I'm super glad you guys are here. I'm just going to give a small intro. I know he's not here right now, but I also just want to say, if you're from the area, I've gotten gear here. I rent here like all the time. Alan, who's up there in Edison, he's awesome. Tell him thank you, because he's like given us a space to use for free and everything. So thanks to Murphy's and Alan. He's really awesome. The other intro I just wanted to share was the Storyteller Collective. We're a really small group. I mean, that's also kind of the purpose. I think it was Kelly that reached out to me, last winter, and just some group of people were like getting together and wanted to do some collective stuff together and just network and encourage one another in the industry and everything. And I don't know if you're like me, I work from home, I have 4 kids, I don't have coworkers, I have children and stuff. So it's cool to just see you guys face to face, and I know so many Instagram handles and stuff, so it's nice to put names and faces and everything together. We do have the Facebook group, Storyteller Collective. We're not trying to blow it up and make it some cool thing and sell stuff. It's just an opportunity for you guys to hang out together, get to know each other, find second shooters, connect and encourage each other, and do things like this. So I think hopefully we're aiming at roughly 3 a year of these types of things. We did, was it last April, I think? We did one, or sometime in the winter. There was a bad storm that time, but a ton of people still came, so it was just really encouraging. So we did a panel there as well. But yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. We just want to encourage you all here, and yeah, we want to jump into a panel. So tonight's topic, through some of those discussions, we want to talk about working together on the wedding day. I kind of, in my stories, shared this with photographers as well, just to encourage you guys. We're going to be talking to some awesome photographers here, and they're just going to share some of their wisdom and their insight and their experience on what it looks like to work together on a wedding day with photo and video and stuff. And so that's kind of going to be the topic. But to dive into that then, I'm just going to have everyone go down the line, just quick. Your name, company, and how long you've been at this. So.
I guess I go first. Okay. The nerves. Okay. Well, I'm Kelly. Kelly Lynn is my business, Kelly Lynn Photography. I live in Lexington and been in business for over 10 years. I think it's been 12 years now. So, yeah, long time.
My name is Mary Thickens. I'm from Ashland, Kentucky, and I've done this for almost 15.
I'm Allison Biggs. I'm from Ashland. I've been doing video for about 10 years now.
I'm Abby Garner. I'm from Lexington, and this is my 6th wedding season, so relatively newbie still, but I feel like I've been at it for a while now, so yeah.
I'm Scott Carroll. My business is Scott Film Company from Bowling Green, and this is my 10th year.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I think I said I'm Rob Sass. My business is Ivory Horse Films. I have a second brand, Chiaro Films, where I do documentary work and nonprofit stuff. But I've been doing this 7 years, so I'm there with you, Abby. I'm one of the young ones. So yeah. So basically, we're going to jump into. I'm going to ask a couple questions to Kelly, and then we're each asking questions to kind of a few people, but please feel free to tag on something at the end if you want to chime in. And depending on time and everything at the end, if you guys have questions, we'll field a couple of those. So we're just going to jump in. So question 1, ready? I'll intro it for you. So one of the things that we've talked about in for wedding videography in the industry, as we thought about this past decade, I think COVID kind of did some of this, is shown people the importance of, it's not just a luxury, but also a necessity to have wedding video as well. And just hearing audio and the ceremonies, I think people have grown in that. So wedding videography has slowly been growing almost on par with photography, I think. And so in light of that, as we try to improve our game, improve how we work with the client experience, we're thinking through things of the pre-planning. So the first question is kind of what does it look like? What, in your experience, can a videographer do, or if they're inquiring with you, to reaching out to you to help be part of the planning process, and not be off-putting and just all that,
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
So when it comes to planning now with weddings, I don't do a ton of planning myself. I primarily work with full service planners, at least a day of coordinator. So once upon a time, like whenever I first started, I did a lot of weddings without planners, so I did kind of have to take over that planning process. But now I kind of just send that to the planner themselves. But as far as still working with a videographer in somewhat of a planning process, I still have a little bit of input on timelines. I still kind of send that over to the planner for the most part. I check with them to make sure that timing, of course, for photos is still in line with what I need. And I think in that regards, that would be really the biggest part of working with a videographer, and maybe talking beforehand about making sure that timing is good for not only photos but enough time for video as well. Because I know on a wedding day, things are fast moving, and a lot of times it's just go, go, go. So I know for me, I like to make sure I have extra time for photo. But I think too that, if I'm talking to a videographer, I want to make sure that the amount of time we have allotted is going to be a good enough time to work together to make sure that they're getting the video that they need as well. So I think that, a videographer reaching out to a photographer and just asking, do you have input on a timeline? Do you have a timeline I can see? I think that would be a good part to start a conversation, or a good way to start a conversation. I think that's the biggest aspect as far as the planning goes. But for me, I'm always open to any vendor that's part of the wedding day to reach out to me and just ask questions. So if there's something specific as far as the planning goes, I'm always willing for them to reach out to me and ask. If it's something that I don't know, I can then be like, hey, let's loop in the wedding planner on this and see if they have any input too. And even as well, there's been times where we've had different locations. It's not just been one location for a wedding. So I've talked with people beforehand to say, okay, listen, these are places that I've thought would be great for photos. Would this be good for video too? Do you have any input? And just trying to come up with ideas that way. So having the planning portion of where we're going to take photos, specifically if it's not going to be all at one venue and you're trying to coordinate getting one place or another. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was just gonna dig in a little bit more with the next one. Yeah. And this might be different, from couple to couple, or I imagine you might do some weddings where there is no videographer. But so how do you approach working with a videographer? So both prior to and then the day of, whether that's emailing, interaction, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I love reaching out to videographers before the wedding, especially if it's someone that I haven't worked with. And then if it is someone I've worked with, I love messaging them and be like, oh my gosh, we get to do this wedding together. I'm so excited. Because, when it's someone that I think it makes it so much easier because, it's almost like you don't even have to, I don't want to say you don't have to communicate, but you can look at the person and be like, yes, that's the look for this specific thing. We're on the same page. But especially if it's someone that I don't know, I love reaching out to them, introducing myself beforehand, just kind of having that common ground of, knowing we're, working as a team and wanting them to know that I'm there if there's any questions, or just to make sure that we are going into it on the same page. And then of course the day of, immediately introducing myself to the videographer. I'm definitely a people person, and I always want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. For me on a wedding day, every person I'm interacting with, I want them to be comfortable, and especially the videographer, because we're working so close together on the wedding day and it should be a team effort. So yeah, I just like to go and introduce myself, see if they need anything, if there's anything I can do on my end, and just make sure that they know that they're valued and I value what they're doing. So yeah.
I love that.
Okay, great. I talk with my hands, so sorry. I'm blaming on the theater part of me. So.
Do y'all want to chime in with anything?
I agree with you. I like, and this will be my questions later, but I totally agree about reaching out to videographers. I think for me, it's I come in peace. I'm friendly. Yeah. I'm easy to work with. Yeah. Because I think, unfortunately, and I don't know if video people, if you know this or have experienced this, I think sometimes it's a little harder as a videographer to kind of come up beside a photographer versus a photographer to come beside, because I can edit a videographer out. But sometimes photographers, we get in our own thing. We're not as always as conscious about, not stepping in front of video, or maybe going too fast through portraits, things like that. So I think that's so important just to come and say, I want to be on the same page.
Yeah, and then for them to know too that because I have had this before where I've been like in the zone and I've accidentally stepped in front of a videographer before and like felt horrible about it afterwards, and and I'm like, if I'm in the way, if there's something happening, like don't feel like you can't come and whisper in my ear and be like, do you care to take a step back? Or like, I need a little bit more time to do this pose. Like, I come, like you said, like I come in peace. I want this day, like the last thing I want as a photographer. And I know there's probably photographers that aren't like this, which makes it hard. But like just knowing that like it is a team effort. So just, yeah.
I feel like just starting the day off on that note too. Like, I'm like, listen, I'm a spaz sometimes. So like, if I'm going fast because the timeline like needs to be fast, like tell me when you like pull me out of the way, or tell me like, okay, we're doing that again. You know what I mean? Like some weddings, unfortunately, the timeline does run behind or something happens where, you're picking up the pace. But like to have that relationship from the beginning to know like, okay, we need to check each other, like keep each other and count, like we're both here, same team, so.
You were so kind. You said you come up and like whisper. I joke with people. I'm joking, but I'm like, if I step in your way and I'm oblivious, I'm so sorry. Just push me out of the way.
Yeah, I've had people say that to me too, and then like I'll like try like be funny and like try to do that, and then I'm like, I'm really sorry. Like I hope you didn't think I was actually being mean. So that's just
So going into the next question, as we think about like the wedding day, maybe sometimes schedules get off. Many situations can happen. Maybe communication doesn't just line up the best. What is just some, whether you're thinking about the ceremony, bridal shots, those are probably the most common ones, but where it is like communications not lining up between photo and video, and maybe there's some tension there. What is some advice to help alleviate some of that?
I think, specifically like you were saying, portraits and ceremony tend to be the biggest, I think, areas, because you're both trying to get these key moments that, I guess portraits can be redone, but of course ceremony can't. So I know like for me, I try to always before the ceremony be like very open and talk with the videographer and tell them like, okay, this is where I'm going to be. This is my flow of the ceremony. And then they typically are like, okay, well, this is what I do. So I try to like lessen the potential for issues to happen by approaching them before the ceremony, and just kind of getting a game plan together. I have had instances, I was telling someone this earlier with a videographer who sat down in the middle of the aisle during a ceremony and didn't move, and then they stepped in front of me during the kiss, and it was very tragic. And thankfully I still got what I needed, but it was a lot of editing out post. And so like that was one of probably the worst situations I had as a photographer, and not a typical situation I would have from a videographer. But obviously that's something that like couldn't be resolved in the moment without disrupting what was happening. So when those, from a photographer standpoint, if something like that happens, I just do my work. I just do it. I just don't make a scene, and then just capture what I can the best way possible with what's given to me. If it's something that's happening during like portraits or something like that, I would just, usually for me, I would just take a step back and say, let me just let you go ahead and get what you need, and then I'll step in and redo it, because I try to avoid confrontation at all costs. That is my approach to things. But I also know that sometimes confrontation can happen, and I can be sassy, but I don't want people to see that side of me. So I really try to reserve that as much as possible. And then, I am not opposed to going up and being like, hey, I really needed this to happen, and there's a little bit of tension right now with posing. And if, say that happened during pre-ceremony photos or something, and we still had sunset photos to go, maybe just saying like, and even if it's happening from the other side, the videographer is having issues with photographer and they need something, just being open and being like, I know today's been stressful, but if we can just like try to work as a team, and this is what I'm gonna try to get in this next segment of photos. I wanna do some movement shots. I wanna do this. Does that work? And then how, like, do you have ideas? And just trying to be open and doing it in a civil way, because I think on wedding days, at least for me, like it can get very stressful. And I think sometimes like you're absorbing the emotions of everyone around you, like being in the position that you're in. And that can sometimes be taken out in ways that we don't want. And so I think just recognizing that and really doing your best to recognize that like we are a team and we have to work together, and how we respond to things is going to be seen by everyone else. And ultimately we want to make sure that everyone we're working with is having the best time. It is not their place to take any negativity that might be happening. So I think just it kind of goes back to just talking and being on the same page and working as a team. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, sorry.
People at the wedding think the photo and video are a team.
Yes. Yeah.
So if the photographer is kind of dissing the videographer or other way around, it can make you both look bad.
Right. Yeah.
And I think too, like, I would never want to be rude to another vendor.
No.
Because, you know, sometimes a client will book me and I'm the first person they book, but sometimes they have booked video first. And I would never want a videographer to be like, oh, I wouldn't recommend her. That would be awful for me. So I try to be as friendly as possible because I want to work with them again.
Same.
And I want to book, you know?
I'm a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Yeah. And two, it's just like, you know, it's not the time and place to cause issues for the couple. And it's hard. Yeah, there are times where it's hard for us as vendors to, like, if we're in those situations, where if it's affecting our work. But that's something where if it like gets to the point to where you need to say something, like taking it outside of the room and just having a civil discussion. Save it for the car ride home.
All your video friends.
Yeah.
Can you believe
Yeah.
to me? And then you feel better.
And then
Yeah.
you feel better.
But not at the wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important because it is easy to let it like fester the day of instead of addressing it. And it probably will be awkward. It might be hard, but I think we're in a very specific type of live event documenting industry.
Yeah.
And so we're serving clients and couples in a very unique way that hopefully it's one time in their life that they're doing. And like, it's the same thing. Like, I want them to remember this well for their own sake, not to be about us. But
Yeah. No,
Awesome.
for sure.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Scott, I'll hand off down to you.
Our turn? Okay. Do you need to say the question as I read it?
Nervous.
Okay. So couples hiring the photographer and videographer are hiring based on the work in their portfolio. Videographers are often delivering full ceremonies, full toasts, and doc edits, which is all the footage of the day, which is a doc edit. What are your clients' expectations for the end product, and how can videographers help?
Okay, I feel like that is like kind of a loaded question because, I mean, when photographers, what they're expecting from us for the end product is obviously a wedding gallery that like perfectly portrays their day. And that's, I mean, I feel like my style as a photographer is I definitely like want to get all of the like portraits and must-have shots and like the stage shots, but I also want to get all of the documentary shots and, you know, fly on the wall when people don't know that I'm paying attention. So I feel like just like a blended mixture of that. But as far as how videographers can help with that, I like when videographers don't just stand back and like let me lead the whole day, because it's very easy for me. I feel like I am like a pretty big personality and I can come into the room and be like, do this, you know, just like directing people right and left. So I've tried to really like in the past few years, like take a step back and like take a read on my couples. Like, do they need this direction? Or can like I just kind of step back, can I talk with the videographer and know like, okay, like this is how we want this to unfold. So let's kind of like set that up to happen in a way that's organic. Or are these people really awkward and they need like my every say-so guidance, you know? Because you just have different couples where some, they don't feel comfortable in front of the camera and they say they want candid photos, but like they don't even know how to hug each other. Like it's just, and their nerves are going and it's their wedding day. And so like some people you do just have to like direct more into it. But in those situations, I mean, I do feel like as a photographer, our day is to like capture it as their story is told, you know, like the good, bad, and hopefully all the pretty, not the good, bad, and the ugly. But truly, like, we're there for the whole day, and we capture the laughs, and we capture the tears, and we capture it all. So, I mean, I feel like having a videographer who's there and is like present and wanting to be part of it and not just like be there and not really have an opinion or care about things, I think is super important to me, because when you both are on the same page and you're starting off the day on the same page, and you're bouncing ideas off of each other in portraits, and you're like, oh, I have this vision, and I'm like, I love that, let's do this next, you know, like same for reception, you know, like instead of just placing them somewhere random for toast, like let's give our opinions and let's talk to the couple beforehand and let them know those opinions. That way we're all on the same page, and our final product, it's just great for all vendors involved.
And I think, oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay to add something. I was like, I don't like butting in. That's another thing. I'm like, so I was just going to say too, I think another way, especially with like the in gallery, is just communicating and making sure that if there's a moment happening that wants to be like videoed and photographed, and like video isn't in the room, like making sure they're there, and vice versa. Yeah. Because there have been moments before where I've like taken a photo of something, and I'm like, wait, stop. And then, you know, or there's been a couple times where like something's happened and I realized that they weren't there, and then I felt so bad because, you know, sometimes it's hard, you're in the moment, and it's easy to forget.
Especially if it's like, and
The
I'm
bride getting dressed.
if it's a male videographer and the bride's getting dressed, and it's kind of on me to say, oh wait, hold on, we have to bring Alex into the room, you know,
Yes.
and sometimes we open the door and he's gone. I'm like, where'd you go? and then he's like way out in the field with a drone. I'm like, come on, you know, we're getting them to kind of, but it's so true.
Yeah.
We forget that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like it just going back to kind of to the, well, I guess talking about like the full gallery, and just making sure that it's known amongst each other if there's something specific that they want. So like if the couple is wanting aerial drone footage, like making sure, and this kind of goes back to the timing of things from that, the first question is like making sure we have that in the timeline, because that's something that they want, that's something that, you know, the videographer wants.
Like two things aren't happening at the same time.
Right, yeah.
Because I've also found out it's very challenging when, like, say they want to do letter reading and it's like a first look, well, the letter reading's happening kind of about the same time, and if they don't have a second photographer or second videographer, we kind of have to stagger it a little bit, and that's you know, so stuff that's good to know beforehand when we're doing like the timeline. Yeah.
I've run into stuff like on my questionnaire that, and even like in the talk before the wedding day, that they'll mention things that they want captured, and I'll say something to the photographer about it, and they won't know. So it's kind of, you know, might be nice to think about, you know, talking to the photographer maybe the day before, or just shooting them a message, or
or even having a call together. I mean, I've done that a few times, and I don't know why we don't do it more, because we have the same role, you know, like to when we have that final timeline meeting, like why don't we all just have it together? It alleviates, well, let me talk to the videographer to see and, you know, confirm if all this is great and change things. So that could be a solution.
Really solve some stuff.
Yeah.
Let me get my next question up. I was going to ask too, like, you mentioned like you not wanting to like lead all day and like wanting a videographer. Do you guys, photographers, ever ask the videographer to like, do you want anything, or do you need to get, or just to take a break from that?
I typically am go, 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 and then at the end, I'm like, do you want anything else? But when they butt in before I get there, I like it, personally. I mean, because then you kind of can breathe, and, you know, you might bring an idea to the table that I'm like, well, I didn't think of that prompt or something.
Especially if they've shot it, like if they've been at the venue and I
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing, because I'm the same way, and I always like try to make it like sorry. I'm like, I knew the stuttering was going to happen at some point. I was like, I was doing so good. And then it happens. Sorry. I'm really trying to hold it in. But like, and hopefully like, you know, Allison can attest to this, and you know, you too, Tyler, but like, anyone I've worked with, like I try to be like, do you need anything? Or like if we're doing a certain shot, be like, are you good? Like, do you need more of it? Oh, and you too, because I'm like seeing people that we've worked with. Yeah. And so like just making sure that they've gotten what they need before we move on. My biggest thing, usually I don't have issues with it, but just communicating too, like if a lot of times like I'll be taking a photo and if the videographer is like, okay, I need to move in, just making sure that I'm completely done, because I shoot film, and so I've had a lot of times people step in front of a frame and I'm like, oh, $5 down the drain because they're like, you know, and it's never like, I never get mad, I like never like say anything, but internally I'm like,
you're so bad.
You know, like in a kitchen, the chefs are like, coming in hot plate or whatever. I'm always like, behind you, to your left or whatever.
yeah, and so yeah. So that's like that's my biggest thing, is just always like, and I try to like tell them beforehand, or if they worked with me before, they know that like if I'm in the mode of like doing my film camera, because a lot of times for portraits, like I'm solo shooting film and my second shooter is shooting over my shoulder to back me up on digital, and so that's the biggest thing for me. But it's more so not like an annoyance of like, oh, you're getting close. It's more so of like, hold on, let me get this done, because film's just a little bit slower. Yeah, the sound. Once the sound is done, then move in. So
I'm also asking often, like, what focal length they're doing, and I'm trying to guesstimate the field. I'm like, where do you have 50, 35? Okay, step back. Like I was like, I'm sorry, I was probably in your
That a lot. I heard that. Because I'm usually 85, and I'm like, oh, you're good. Just get right in there. You know, I don't see you.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. I think it's right. It's no secret flash photography is disruptive in video. Ha ha.
Who wrote this?
This is more of a disturbance in getting. Wait a minute. This is more of a disturbance in the getting ready shots than the reception. How troubling is it to ask for shots without flash? How should a videographer approach this issue?
Okay, I feel like it's not troubling at all to ask for getting ready photos without flash. I only put on my flash if it's literally like the darkest dungeon you've ever seen. Otherwise, I just avoid flash getting ready photos. It's not my style. I mean, I feel like it can be really, it could be great, but I just feel like it kind of like messes up the flow. I don't know. It feels just flash photos, unless you're in a big reception space where people don't notice. Even still, I watch like behind the scene videos, you know, of your couples on Instagram, and I'm like, wow, I was fire in that flash. Like, I was not being very obvious. But I feel like in those like precious, slower getting ready moments, I just feel like I'm disruptive if I'm there firing a flash, especially being the overshooter that I am. So I definitely push for natural light, but I feel like that's a discussion that I have with my clients before the wedding day as well, because you don't want them getting ready in a basement anyways, you know, like, so to avoid that problem, like pushing, like you're just going to feel better about yourself, have less anxiety in a cleaner, brighter room. Like, it's true, if you cram all the bridesmaids into one dark hotel room, you're going to be stressed. Like, and that's open, honest conversations that I have with brides, and they understand, and they are happier with it in the long run. You know, if that takes booking a few hotel rooms or booking an Airbnb that has more space and lighting, just to feel like a sense of calm. I mean, y'all know that's what the sun does to us. So, but yeah, if you are put in that situation where the photographer's using flash, I feel like definitely asking to repeat is not a problem. I would totally understand. Like, I'm gonna get my shot and then we're gonna stage it and do the exact same thing for video. Do you feel like you've had photographers who shoot flash getting ready?
Yeah, just this last Friday I did.
Oh, there we go. Oh man.
Yeah.
Because like I never use flash getting ready.
Y'all don't.
Yeah, but I will say I was like thinking about this earlier when I looked at that question, because in my mind I was like, I don't, like, who uses flash for that? But then I was like, it dawned on me, like, there is this style of photography now where flash is very much a thing.
Flash photography style.
Yeah, and it's like, doesn't matter the lighting situation, like, they just want that look. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think just like being kind and saying, hey, like, it's messing with video, can we kind of balance it out? Like, you know, get what you need, and then
tell me when you're done, and then let's redo it. And if that takes mom zipping up the dress again, well, you have to get your shot too. It's equally as important.
So obviously we asked to turn the lights out, which most photographers are okay with that, like turning the lights out for natural light. And she just said, I asked her, you know, if I could get some shots without the flash, and she was fine with it. And we basically shot at the same time. And it was almost like taking turns. Like I would get a shot, and then she would say, "Are you good?" while everything was happening, you know, because they were taking their time, just so everything is natural, and it's not like redoing kind of fake stuff. But yeah, it was because it took a little time to put the dress, you know, zip the dress up and like do the buttons. But yeah, it was nice. It wasn't. I had a little anxiety because
it's more awkward to ask when it's part of their style, like, you know.
It's also hard because you know that you're both, like, if she's shooting, you're going to be missing the moments, versus if you're shooting, she's scared she's going to miss a moment. So,
and it wasn't as bad as I thought. I think because she wasn't one of those photographers that have to have like continuous shooting. Like she just shot moments that she thought she should get. Like it wasn't like pow 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 pow.
Yeah.
So that made it a lot nicer.
Yeah.
I feel like in my experience, that's been the biggest difference. Like, are they trigger happy and just flash, flash, flash? Like, if they're using flash, I'm typically like, okay, I'm just not going to focus, or I'm going to, in the edit, post-production, cut out those moments and stuff. So.
Or just try to get the in-between moments. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
because I do a little bit of bounce flash. It just depends. In camera, it looks very natural, but it's more on the side of the wall. And I always say, especially if it's a venue I've shot at and I've noticed it's kind of a dark, but I want it to look like window light, I'll say, hey, I'm going to do some bounce flash. If this bothers you, let me know. I typically try to give 30, 40 minutes for the couple to get ready anyways when I do the timeline. And then we try to kind of bounce back and forth. So there is a little bit of, like, we're kind of taking turns.
Yeah.
But I think especially when you've been shooting as long as I have, you know what you need, and you don't shoot as I don't shoot as often.
I don't shoot as much as I used to.
Yeah, I think like in the beginning,
Really
especially,
narrow.
it's like.
Yeah, well, especially with film.
But the film
really
definitely,
slows you down.
yeah. So I'm like a click, I got it, which is so much nice on the back end, like editing.
Yeah.
It's like yes.